This presentation is over the speech and language development during early childhood, from birth to 3 years old. During the period of 0 to 24 months, children go from crying to saying short phrases, and from 2 to 3 years old, children go from saying early sentences to telling short stories. Language form, also thought of as the structure of language, involves phonology, morphology, and syntax. Let's look at each of these to understand what they mean for a young child. Phonology is the study of phonemes, or the sounds we use to construct words. For example, the English R and the Spanish R do not make the same sound. Spanish even has phonemes that English does not have, for example, the rolled R sound. A phoneme changes the meaning of a word. Look at the words dog, log, and fog. We know that the sounds d, l, and f are phonemes because placing these different sounds in front of the root word og changes its meaning. At birth, newborn infants can already hear the different variations in speech sounds and distinguish between phonemes, not just for their own language, but all languages. They lose this ability around 12 months old, and from that point on can only distinguish between phonemes in their native language. This happens during a process called synaptic pruning. Newborns focus on gaining control of the muscles responsible for breathing and feeding first, and then speech begins. Infants start with crying and cooing to communicate. Cooing can sound like growls, squeals, and vowel sounds. At 4 to 6 months old, these speech production muscles get stronger and babies start babbling, which is a combination of phonetic vowels and consonants. Reduplicated babbling is saying the same sound over and over, like ma 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 or da da da. Variegated babbling combines different syllables like ba wa bi do. Around 9 months old, babbling turns into expressive jargon, which has the intonations of statements and questions, except none of the sounds are recognizable words. Children say their first words around the time of their first birthday, and up until about 2 years old, children use a mixture of expressive jargon and real words to communicate. The earliest set of phonemes acquired by children is m, b, n, w, d, p, h. These sounds are often acquired by the time the child is 3 years old. Morphology refers to the internal organization of words. A morpheme is a word that cannot be divided further without losing its grammatical meaning. The word bird is a morpheme. It cannot be divided into parts that have any meaning by themselves. B and erd have no meaning. Bird is an example of a free morpheme because it stands alone as a word with a clear grammatical meaning. There are also bound morphemes. An example of a bound morpheme is the S in dogs because it adds meaning telling us there's more than one dog, or the ed at the end of jumped tells us it happened in the past. Some of the earliest grammatical morphemes a child will use include the plural S, 2 dogs, and the possessive S, the girl's bike. At about 3 years old, children start to use morphemes that denote past and present verb tense, as in, my sister swims, or the man jumped. Syntax can be thought of as how we sequence words or string them together to form sentences. Syntax is the formal term for grammar. Imagine a child saying, him holded baby doggy. This is not grammatically correct, but we still understand what the child meant. Once kids have a large enough vocabulary at around 2 years old, they begin to combine words into 2- and 3-word utterances, such as cuddle Teddy or no nap. These utterances are the building blocks of grammar because they usually reflect proper word order. The ability to produce 2-word utterances means they can also express relationships between ideas. For example, children will combine words like big or more with nouns to say things like big shoe or more apple. Children between 2 and 3 years old will also use a rising intonation to ask questions like, see ball? By the age of 3, children start to combine elements, saying things like, I want juice and cookie. One interesting thing to note, there is a relationship between the way parents interact with their children and the child's language development. It is important for parents to use short, grammatically correct statements when talking to their children. For example, it is better for parents to say, the kitty is jumping, than see kitty jump. Also, children's grammatical growth can be accelerated by parents verbally describing their child's actions. Parents can help their kids learn language by narrating the child's actions for them. For example, as a child is reaching out to touch the puppy, the parent could say, you're petting the puppy. This helps the child learn the words and also how the words should be put together in proper syntax to form a grammatically correct sentence. Language content is the meaning of words. Children develop a lexicon, which is a mental dictionary of words and their corresponding meaning. Learning words takes place over the entire lifespan because new words are always being encountered. To make language even more complex, there are many words that have multiple meanings. For example, the word right can be the opposite of left, or it can mean correct, or morally justified. Language content is about more than word meaning. Speakers use groups of words to express ideas about people, objects, and actions, like Sam ate the apple, as well as ideas about relationships like location or possession. Sam ate Jill's apple in the kitchen. Semantics is the linguistic representation of objects, ideas, feelings, and events, and the relationship between these things. A child doesn't understand different words until they are about 6 months old. By their first birthday, infants typically understand about 20 different words. Between the ages of 10 to 14 months, their vocabulary increases beyond their first words, expanding to 200 or more words by the time they are 2 years old. Language use concerns the goals we have when using language and the way we choose words that are the best fit for that moment in time. Pragmatics are social linguistic conventions that help us decide what to say to whom, how to say it, and when to say it. Imagine you are telling someone about a good movie you just watched. You could say, "That was one of the most interesting stories I've ever seen on screen," or "That film was incredible," or even "Talk about an epic movie." We choose different words based on what we believe will best communicate our meaning to the audience we are speaking to. Before children are able to communicate with words, they communicate without words. For example, when they want something, they may point to it and make noises that sound pretty demanding for a toddler. Even without words, their desire is clearly understood. Pointing is an important language development milestone that happens between the ages of 12 and 18 months and is one of the earliest forms of communication. Children will also look at the parent, then look at an object, and then look back to the parent, and then back to the object until the parent gets what the child wants. This is important because it shows children that communication gives them some control over their environment. Until a child is around 2 or 3 years old, adults are responsible for most of the conversation that goes on. But by 3 years old, children begin to have a larger role in that conversation. One important thing that happens around the age of 3 is the beginning of narration, the ability to express a chain of events in the form of a story. A child's first personal narratives consist of 1 or 2 sentences like, "I goed to the park today," "I saw birds." These stories get longer and more complex as the child continues to develop. So, what is effective language? Effective language requires an interaction of content, form, and use. The speaker thinks of something to say and the best words to say it with, and they put those words into sentences that fit their goal for the situation. Listeners interpret the words and sentences they hear with reference to what they already know about the language and the situation they are in with the speaker. Thank you for watching my presentation on speech and language development from birth to 3 years.